East Tennessee for 2 weeks. Kerry joined and was with me there for a week. I just want to say congratulations. Now you sort of know what it's like to be married to me, which is a rough task, and I'm so glad your wife is a counselor. So I can only imagine all of the feels of spending a week with me. So well done. You survived. So good. The first week that I was in East Tennessee, we go to a school called Emmanuel Christian Seminary. So out of our restoration movement, back in the 1700s, there was a movement away from denominationalism, and out of that sprung the Christian churches. You might even see Christian churches, Churches of Christ, and Disciples of Christ. They all, so here's ironic, they all were together in a unity movement to get away from denominationalism and focus on, right? Thank you for laughing at that, but they were focused on unity. We are a New Testament Christian church. We are focused on the essentials, there's just a handful of essentials, and non-essentials, we have grace and liberty. And then in all things, we love one another, and we seek to point people to Christ. Out of that restoration movement came a lot of our colleges and universities, and our probably most esteemed seminary is Emmanuel Christian Seminary. Yes, I'm like, they changed your name a little bit, so I'm like hiccuping over that. Yes, and then you get the joke on the unity movement, right? Because right when they started this restoration movement, it divided into three. Isn't that beautiful? Just so good. So you had the Disciples of Christ that went much more, kind of a maybe more liberal in some of their belief systems. You had the Christian churches that stayed kind of true to the tenets of the restoration movement. Then you had the Churches of Christ, which went pretty conservative. That's where you get your non-instrumental Christian churches. Pepperdine University comes out of that, so out of the restoration movement. So anyways, this is the school, Emmanuel Christian Seminary, where we go. I did my Master's of Divinity there years ago, like another lifetime. And then about 3 years ago, I was introduced to the opportunity to start my doctorate work. And in the middle of all that doctorate work, Kerry was kind of interested, like, hey, what are you doing? And so I told him about it, and he then applied, and we'll let you speak into that here in just a moment. But in all of that, we have chosen to be a part of having others, especially amazing people, pour into us so that we can pour into you. And we can lead you and serve you with grace and with some wisdom, we pray at some points, but more than anything, to be able to draw closer in our own relationship with God. So I'll stop there. Why in the world are you going to Emmanuel? Why are you pursuing a doctorate degree?
Well, I was trapped. No. Man, sometimes you get opportunities that you see, I need to take advantage of this. Just as we know, with education and prices of everything, and is there value here? Is there no value here? What should we do? Seeing Bob go through the program and seeing the growth that he had and the discussions that we would have when he would come back and go through a class, it piqued my interest. And I realized, I was like, well, if it's good enough for him, why wouldn't I look into it also? And then everyone was so nice, and they were like, oh my goodness, you should come, you should check it out. Look at all these pamphlets. And then they got me, they're like, it's still school, work. And so, but I've been learning a lot from the classes, and especially this experience. It's been great, not only just learning, digging into scripture deeper, but also digging into new communities in Tennessee, learning more about Bob's background and understanding like, oh, wow, I see why he's doing the things that he's doing. And also just seeing that the pastor that you see on Sundays is the same man he is everywhere else. He's very consistent. He's respected, and people respect what he says scripturally, and he stands with a stature around there, Not that, he's cool. He's a cool guy. But they also, they respect him as a pastor. and they respect him and what he says in class. And that was really awesome to see that, our little church over here in the country part of Tualatin, Oregon, I told them we were the country. They didn't go with it. But our little church has a pastor, has a man, has a father, has a husband who is respected. And that was just really awesome to see.
Thank you. Yeah, right. I just went broke on that one. Thank you. That's so good. To be a part of something like this, people ask why. Why would you move forward in education? Why would you move forward in a doctorate degree? Why would you do these things? My flippant answer is I literally want my children to call me doctor for at least the first year. So that's mandatory from there. But in all reality, it has been a bucket list situation. But when we planted the bridge 6+ years ago, everything has been very on the ground, very practical. Not a lot of time for a lot of depth and study and research because we're just moving. Like, here we go. This is what we're doing. And I had this season that I was challenged by my youngest son that he was finishing up college. And he's like, why wouldn't you pursue this bucket list? And I was like, well, maybe it is time for me to kind of intentionally drill down a little bit more in my own relationship with God, but the depth of my study and my understanding of the Word of God and who God is. And what's ironic is the deeper you go in your studies, the more you realize you don't understand anything about God. And it becomes that much more challenging, which leads me into these last 2 weeks. The first week I was there, we went through the book of Job. Anyone want to do a doctorate program on the book of Job? It's one of those moments where you're in over your head, just completely in over your head. And when it comes to Job, somebody asked me, are you going to come back and do a series on Job? And the answer is no. Not for a while, but you are going to get a little bit of taste of Job, which kind of works into a little bit of where Kerry and I, what we'll be talking about as we kind of walk through this in an unscripted way this morning. But Job is, so I'll tell you, the first week was Job. The second week was on grief and suffering, pastoral care. How do we walk through that? And Kerry will speak into that more here in just a few moments as well. But I want to share with you just a little bit of Job. You know the story of Job. Job is one where you see Job not only written in the Old Testament, but if I might just kind of blow your mind, Job, the story of Job is written in all kinds of historical literature outside of Scripture. So you find the narrative of Job in a lot of different cultures, which brings up a lot of questions concerning this story and who is God and why do we find this in different cultures and such. I'm not going to answer a lot of questions. I'm actually just going to give you a lot of stuff to go, great, I'm completely messed up when I walk out of this church. So, but not really. But I do want to give you a few things. What do we know about Job? Out of the gate, we're going to read a little bit of scripture on that here in a second. But Job is, the first part of Job is he's afflicted. There's a little conversation between God and Hasatan, Satan, right? The evil one. And there's this narrative between the two that there's a man that God's going to allow to be kind of crushed a bit by Hasatan. So Job is afflicted. You see that in the first part of Job, that all of the blessings of his life are taken away. And then you see the big narrative is Job's challenged during that. Job challenges God. Like, where are you? What have I done? Have I sinned? Well, he didn't worry about him sinning, but his friends would speak into that. Like, you must have sinned. And he goes through this whole thing like, I would have rather not lived. There's some pretty deep, raw moments that if you've gone through brokenness, you resonate with Job. There's even moments with Job that we believe that there are some suicidal thoughts in Job's life. Like, I don't want to be here. Why did you even create me? And I think if you're honest, when you go through broken moments, you can go, I kind of get that. I resonate with the brokenness of Job. And then at the end, And then you have his friends, right? You've got his three amigos who come speak to him. They all speak to him without being asked. The brilliancy of those three friends, though, was they spent 7 days just sitting with Job at the very beginning of all of it. And they didn't say anything. That might have been some of the best moments for Job. And I'll speak into that just a little bit about what our role is a little bit when it comes to people who are dealing with grief and suffering and brokenness. But you got these three amigos, they speak into the life of Job. They say things to him that are out of turn, maybe out of bounds. Job responds back to them. And then you get this guy, Elihu, who comes and he doesn't even have a relationship with Job. And he tells Job all kinds of stuff, right? And so in all of that, you've got all these people speaking of Job's life. At the very end, God challenges Job. And you see the blessings be restored. Some questions that come out of Job. How do we understand God's character? How do you deal with God in the midst of brokenness and suffering? And is he big enough to deal with your questions and your anger and your concern? I think from Job, we find the answer is yes. God's big enough to handle it. Not only that, it's probably more healthy for you to be able to speak up rather than to keep it in. Like there can be moments you might go find a tree or a park or even the bedroom of your house and just start, you can do it. I'm giving you the green light. You can go yell at God. God can take it. And we can speak into that later, but Job is a really great example of one who goes, okay, God, what's happening here? I don't get it and I don't like it. It's totally okay. In that, to begin to walk through that, because God's character is one where he cares, he's concerned, and one of the things you see in Job is he still is engaged during our suffering. So how do we faithfully act when we're broken? How do you do it in such a way that you don't lose your relationship with God? I do think that the church has done a poor job of helping us navigate that. We'll actually talk a little bit more in just a minute about grief and suffering and death. The church has done a really disservice to, I think, our church to our family members in talking about death. We'd rather not. It's interesting, right? What was one of the things we talked about? Services and stuff. Just a brief thing, and you can share it a little bit, but what the difference between even East Tennessee to here?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we saw were there were the smaller churches that had the cemeteries and the graves on the church campuses.
Have you ever seen that? The churches with cemeteries right on their property? Yeah. So actually, we're going to move out of a building project, and we're doing a cemetery out here.
For sure.
Yeah, so that's really great.
And you can buy an extra double wide, so that way people know you're special. Your headstone will be larger than everyone else's.
We're not doing that, so...
It was different seeing that. It was different seeing smaller buildings with large space, seeing the communities of churches that had headstones with family names. So you saw generations of people being buried there. It was a truly a church family. And it made me even look at more of our coastal churches where it challenged me like, boy, we really do look at church as a commodity. And we walk into churches saying, well, do you have this? Do you have this? And do you have this? No, I think I need to find something else. Versus here, you could see, well, we don't have this. We'll try our best to do this. And you saw the people coming together to try to build what the church needed. And then if somebody died, well, it went until somebody else came to do it. But you remembered who started that, who maybe the head deacon was. You just saw the tighter community in that church. And that was really impactful.
Yeah, it was pretty powerful, especially just the connection and family aspect of the churches. And we'll speak of that in just a moment. If you would stand with me, we're going to look at Job chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. I just want you to see the setting of Job real quick. And then we'll walk in just to a couple more things here this morning with you. In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. He was blameless. He was upright. And he feared God. And he shunned evil. He had 7 sons and he had 3 daughters. And he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys. And he had season tickets to the Lakers. He had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people in the East. His sons used to hold feasts in their homes on their birthdays, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would make arrangements for them to be purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This became Job's regular custom. Really intriguing about Job. He was an upright man. He also wanted to make sure all of the I's were dotted and the T's are crossed with his family and his kids. And then it all comes crashing down. How, when you've lived a life of faithfulness and character and things begin to not go your way, how do you faithfully live well with Jesus? You can have a seat. So, how are we faithful this side of the grave when things don't make sense? Things have been going great, and then it comes crashing down. You have your notes in front of you. I'm literally actually just have these just so you can stay awake during this. But the first question a lot of us might have, especially when it comes to Job, everything's going on, but in our own lives, why? Why? That's your first blank. In grief and suffering, why is there grief and suffering? We're not really going to answer the question, but that is part of our journey as a Jesus follower and with our relationship with God. Why? Why is it that these things take place? Why is it for Job, his wealth was taken away? Why is it that his children were killed? Why is it that he's afflicted with pains and sores all over his body? But no matter what the why is, despite all of this, Job never cursed God. Instead, he said, the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. How do you do that well? Well, I think that part of it is we as a church need to speak into this a little bit better when it comes to why bad things happen. You know, what happens when we have grief and suffering. How do we responsibly live this side of the grave and do this well with one another in the midst of all of that? And it's not to say that this is easy to navigate, because most of us, all of us know it's not. This is not easy to navigate. It can shake who we are at the core foundations. And Kerry, I know this is totally off the cuff, but you understand a little bit about the background of churches when it comes to, I say, health and wealth gospel kind of stuff. How does that break out down our understanding of God, and how does that take us off the trajectory of who He is?
Yeah, you find yourself making yourself more important than God at times. You'll hear certain language. You'll hear, God is binded by His promises, and they use it in a way of saying you're essentially trapping God into doing what you want Him to do. You hear people essentially saying, if it's not going the way you want it to go, well, you're lacking faith. And so essentially, if it hurts or if it's painful, it must be evil and it must be of the devil. Therefore, you're doing something wrong. Now you'll hear it like, oh yeah, I want to be rich. I want to have this new car. I want to get this new house. But if that doesn't happen, there has to be an opposite end. And that's the opposite end. So that's what ends up being your theology, that if it's bad, it must be of the devil. So if anything bad is happening to you, you're not being a good enough Christian, which book of Job, shows that's not the case at all.
Yeah, and also, I think an awesome view of that. The other part, too, I think for us, is that when we begin to look at God as one who is a Santa Claus, right, who is taking care and meeting all of our needs, and then things go south, you begin to question, where'd you go? Why'd you stop? And what does that do in our relationship with God? We begin to question, do you really exist? Are you around? Do you love me? Do you care for me? See, when we begin to understand the character of God a little bit more, and we'll walk through a little bit of that over the next little while, who God is and how he cares for us. The fact of the matter is, in this particular case, we don't know why we go through grief and suffering all the time, why certain things happen. But what we do know is God calls us to be faithful to him, and he will take care. He does promise. Now, how do we navigate it? Well, that number 2 that I have for you is grief and suffering ought not be experienced alone. That was huge for Job. Yes, they spoke stuff into his life that was not accurate, maybe even theologically off base. But for 7 days, they did something pretty powerful. They just sat with him. It's kind of funny. We shared some things going on in our lives in class, and in that grief and suffering class, I shared something that I'll talk about later, but I shared something in the class, and most of the people had gone through the Job class with us, and so they knew what the right things are to say, and because there's right things to say when people are going through broken moments, and there's things that you don't say, right? There's bad theology that we could share that really hurt people. And everybody in the Job class came up and just kind of hugged me, or sat beside me. And they're like, we love you or whatever. There was one individual who wasn't in that class. Hey, let me give you some insight on this. And I'm like, oh, you're Elihu. Oh, I get it. Yeah, you're one of the people. And the things he was saying was not helpful. And I'm like, oh, I practically get this. I get it when people come alongside, they think they know the answers, but here's the thing. Most importantly, we find in Job, and I just wanted to give this to you, don't go through grief and suffering and pain alone. Let us come alongside of you. Let us be the people who sit with you. I sent a text message to one of our family members this last week, and because this individual has been doing that with somebody else. He's been their advocate. He's next to them. He prays with them. He engages with them. He goes to doctor appointments with him. And I'm just like, dude, that's what we need to be as a church. Those are the kind of people we need to be. So don't do it alone. And the last thing, I want to let you do this, and this will move us into our second week of class. But the third thing is grief and suffering, it grabs your attention. It grabs your attention. C.S. Lewis, I shared this a long time ago, but I'll give it to you again here this morning. C.S. Lewis wrote this quote. He said, God whispers to us in our pleasures, but he speaks in our conscience, and he shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. Suffering, in other words, has a way of getting your attention. When we went into the second week, and so those are just some highlights of Job. When we went into the second week, they intentionally put these 2 classes together for their doctorate students. There are about 17-ish students going through this right now. It's the largest class that they've ever had go through this program. They've kind of revamped some stuff, and it's been excellent. They purposely put these 2 classes together. This is the one where Kerry flew in. Hey, Kerry, by the way, that first weekend, you were there? How was the first weekend in East Tennessee?
I love Tennessee. Tennessee's great.
What did we do to you?
Well, I have to keep coming for 3 more years, so I have not a bad thing to say about Tennessee. See you guys next year. No, I got thrown into the culture. I think, because the online program is a hybrid program. I think it's real easy when something's hybrid or online. You just kind of want to get your work done, get in and get out. And I don't know how locked in you feel into the school and the culture, but when you hear people who've gone to school in different states, you see them kind of beam up because they understand it because they live there. And so I thought it was really valuable, and I thought it was awesome that we have this hybrid moment to come and hang out for 2 weeks. And I got to understand East Tennessee culture, and it is not Los Angeles culture, and it is not Portland culture.
No.
But it's good. And it was my first time going to the South. I didn't know what to expect. I only went by movies. Never go by movies. That is not how you should do it. But it was so awesome. Everyone was so nice. They were everything felt so warm, and they were awesome folks down there.
So so Saturday he lands Friday night. We come up to East Tennessee Friday night, and Saturday morning I wake him up really early, and we're going to the lake. We had a lake day. We got a pontoon boat. We had a house that we were able to kind of hang out at, and we went out on the lake and just had a great day. However, you stayed back and prayed.
Yep.
Well, you went to the lake house.
Kerry doesn't swim. I was like, how big is this boat? How many of us is going? I'll believe God next year.
Next year we got you on the lake, right? We get you out there. We had a great day out there, great barbecue afterwards, and then we went to church Sunday. Took him to a church just to kind of get a feel of East Tennessee culture down there, and so that was unique. And then we get entering into a class of pastoral care on grief, suffering, and death. Probably the least rigorous of classes we've offered in our doctorate program. There wasn't a lot of pre-reading, not a lot of deep study or theological thinking yet in this. In fact, we went into this class, you don't need to be prepared. You just need to have your arms and heart and mind wide open to what you're going to experience over the next 5 days. Of my 3 years, this week was probably the hardest for me emotionally to go through. We don't do death well. We don't do death well. And it has spurred me on to, we'll probably see this more in the fall, if not winter. We've used to have what are called life tracks, a Sunday evening, 4 or 5 nights where we get together for an hour and a half. We go through kind of a lesson stuff. We've worked on grief and depression. We've worked on all kinds of different stuff. This one, I think we're going to do some work on death. How do we die well? It sounds depressing, doesn't it? But it's so important for us as a church because I think it will allow us to come more alive in our relationship with God. I want to speak into a little bit about that, some highlights of the week for you on that?
Yeah. So many things are coming to mind. When you minimize sin, you minimize the greatness of Jesus dying on the cross and saving us from our sin. You make that less and less the more you go, well, my sin was okay. It was all right. I'll be okay. It was a small one. But when you realize how drastic sin is, it makes Jesus' death and resurrection greater. Mm. So when you minimize death to someone else because you're uncomfortable with their grieving, you are minimizing life. And you are minimizing the gift of life that God has given you because you don't want to be uncomfortable. And to think about it, comfort might as well be a bad word in the church because a lot of things that we do, some of the quick sayings that we say to try to bring immediate comfort, it's not really for the person. It's for us. It's for us. We don't want to go through it. I mean, what do they say? The first thing they tell a husband, hey, don't try to fix your problems for your wife. Why do they say that? You go, I just want to fix it. I just want to help you. Is it because you want to help them, or are you uncomfortable really sitting there with them in their discomfort? That's something you have to learn. And that's something the church has to learn about death. Just saying death and leaving it there, death, that's heavy. Mm-hmm. That's heavy. But we as the church need to learn how to sit in that and bear one another's burdens and sit with them. Mm. And we need to learn how to do that. Mm.
One of the really interesting points that I saw when we were going through this last week, by the way, it was a really rough week. We had one day where we had a half a day in the morning where we actually watched a movie. So we were like, oh, it's like elementary school. So we're going to watch a movie. And then afterwards, we're going to watch it backwards. Remember those days? Anybody ever had that opportunity to do that? Anyways, maybe it was only me. So, but we watched a movie. It is called Wit with Emma Thompson. Anybody ever see the movie? Okay, so if you do, I just want to give you a warning. It's heavy. It's deep. You know, we're doctorate students. We're fine. There wasn't a soul that didn't walk out after we watch a movie and just have to walk for about a half hour. So how do we do this? How do we as pastors walk with our church family through these moments better and well? I think, one, we need to set our family up to understand what death is all about. Interesting connection with baptism. Death is the culmination of baptism. We're being buried in Christ. We're dying in him and being raised to new life. Well, isn't that what the celebration of death should be all about? It's this resurrection, and we know this comma. It's not the period in our life. It's just a comma. It's a movement into this continued eternal relationship with God. And so how do we do that well? We live in a world and a culture that death is rough. It's difficult to handle. We work with a medical world right now that wants to sustain life, right? And all for the good, but there's a lot of ramifications into what the medical world is trying to accomplish when it comes to us living well. And also, we need to ask the questions, are the things that we're doing in our life allowing us to live well? Or do we need to be able to handle death a little bit better, to make better decisions down the road? A lot there to unpack later on down the road, but that's the kind of stuff we work through as students, because we want to be able to walk with you when we go through difficult moments in life that might end in death. Anything else out of that class? I know we're going to spend more time on it down the road, but anything else that really struck you?
Yeah. I think I just want to apologize to you all. Because there have been times where I've been speaking or I've been doing something, and I've had moments that I remembered, say my grandfather who passed, different family members, different issues. And I tried to hide that grief. And that's not me being vulnerable and open to a community that says they want to love me and accept me. So I ask for forgiveness for trying to hide how I was truly feeling in the moment, even if it was for a microsecond. I think I was saying I did not trust my community to sit with me. And as one of the pastors here, I need to be one of the first to be vulnerable, to be that example, so that we can do that as a church also.
Thank you. I think that's something that I hope you see out of us. We want to serve you by example. We want to point you to the creator of the universe that provides life.